So Nathan says, hey, Ben, looking good today. Thank you, sir. Of course. He says, how would you define Zionism, and do you consider yourself a Zionist? Thanks, bro. Yes, I consider myself a Zionist. Zionism is the idea that the Jews deserve a state of their own in biblical Israel. I'm a Zionist because I am a Jew, and Jews, like a Jew who believes in Judaism, not because I'm ethnically Jewish. And Judaism is a Zionist religion that suggests that there should be Jewish rule in the Holy Land, and that it was a biblical promise. Now, what's interesting is people take that to mean that there has to be a kingship in the Holy Land. The Bible is, as I've said before, I think I talked about it this week in the Bible segment, the Bible is really ambivalent about state power. It is not big on the idea of theocracy per se, but it's the idea that there ought to be a Jewish state based on foundational Jewish principles. It's true for a few reasons, among them anti-Semitism and the tremendous outpouring of anti-Semitism that has existed throughout history, and also the idea that a country ruled by Jewish principles will be a good country, just like a country ruled by Christian principles in the United States is a good country. If you wonder if the anti-Israel motivation is caused by anti-Semitism, the answer is yes. European anti-Semitism has long roots. Now, there's a lot of European anti-Semitism that's based off of new Muslim migrants and also secular leftists who believe that Israel is a nefarious force for Western imperialism. So there's a piece in USA Today. When telecommunications manager Mikhail Tanayev emigrated to Germany in 1998 from his native Russia as a teen, his Jewish faith didn't matter to classmates or neighbors. But now, he says, when I arrived in Germany, I never saw such displays, but now there are thousands of people who are burning Israeli flags in the streets. In 2006, Germany recorded 1,500 anti-Semitic incidents. That was a massive increase from previous years. According to a recent survey in Western Germany, 62% of Jewish respondents said they experienced anti-Semitism in their everyday lives. 28% said they were victims of verbal attacks or harassment in the past year. When I visited France, my wife and I were afraid to go in particular districts while I was wearing a yarmulke. I wore a baseball cap instead. When I was in London, I think I've told this story on the show. When I was in London, there was a situation where we went to Madame Tussauds Wax Museum. We were walking around, looking at all the statues. No Jewish statues, right, except for Albert Einstein. And behind us, there's a group of young Muslims. You can tell because the woman's wearing a hijab. She's surrounded by two guys who also look like they are from Muslim countries. And they actually walk up to the statue of Albert Einstein and start strangling it. And I figured, well, maybe they just don't like the theory of relativity. Turns out not. There's also a wax statue of Hitler. And while every British person there was walking over and strangling Hitler, these young Muslims went over and put their arms around Hitler like he was Uncle Hitler and began taking pictures. Anti-Semitism is on the rise there. It's on the rise in places like Sweden, not just because of radical Islam, but also because of a secular movement that sees religious education as backwards and non-progressive. Nordic countries maintain opinion corridors for acceptable ideas in the public square, and those opinion corridors do not include religious people very often. So anti-Semitism, anti-Israel sentiment, it may be true that not everyone anti-Israel is anti-Semitic, but everyone anti-Semitic is certainly anti-Israel, and there is pretty significant crossover between the two groups.
Welcome back, everyone. I want you to take a look at your screen right now. This is sunrise over Gaza City. Just 2.5 hours from now, the official ceasefire that's been agreed to by Israel and Hamas will begin. But at the moment there, it looks tranquil and peaceful. And we will see if that can continue for the next 2.5 hours and beyond. We will keep you posted as to what's happening on the ground. But after 27 days of defending itself, has Israel somehow lost more in the eyes of the world than Hamas has? Here to debate that is Ben Shapiro. He's the editor-in-chief of truthrevolt.org, and Rula Jabrial, a foreign policy analyst and author of the novel Miral. Thanks to both of you for being here. Ben, I want to start with you. Is it your impression that in the court of public opinion that Israel has somehow taken more of a hit during these 27 days than Hamas has?
There's no question. I mean, Hamas is a terrorist group, and people going in understood Hamas to be a terrorist group. Israel, thanks to outlets like CNN, has been turned into the villain in this particular scenario, and a moral equivalency has been drawn between the two groups. If Hamas could have come up with any sort of outlet that could have created a will to kill more Jewish babies and Palestinian babies, CNN would have been it. I mean, CNN is a key factor in drawing the same sort of equivalency that Hamas hopes to win.
Hold on a second. I just want to stop you right there, because you're saying that because CNN has interviewed Palestinian families and shown Palestinian children who have been wounded or killed, that somehow CNN is saying that Hamas is okay. I don't think that those two are equivalent. We're not allowed to show the civilians caught in the crossfire?
Of course you're allowed to show civilians caught in the crossfire. You should also mention all the restrictions that Hamas puts on your reporting inside the Gaza Strip. You should also mention all the context with regard to Hamas putting children in harm's way. You should also routinely mention the fact that Hamas's charter calls for the destruction not only of the state of Israel, but for the murder of Jews across the world, which, of course, CNN does not.
That's silly, Ben. We talk about that all the time. We talk about the charter, the Hamas charter that says that they want to obliterate Israel and wipe Israel off the face of the map. You're just not being fair. That's not true. Our reporters on the ground do say that.
You mention it occasionally in the midst of vast swaths of imagery about Israel using what you would term excessive force.
Rula, what's your impression of what's going on these past 27 days?
I think Ben is not in a position to really lecture us about extremism, especially after what he said about President Obama when he called him a Jew hater, when he called him anti-Semitic, and when he called for the expulsion of Arabs in the West Bank and Gaza, and Arab Israelis like myself as a solution. You know, it's so hard to listen to somebody that even Jeffrey Goldberg called a fascist. Saying that, I think the issue about the public opinion will be connected to what happened, especially after the schools, the UN schools that were hit by the Israelis 7 times after UN officials told Israelis more than once, actually 35 times, they told Israelis, the IDF, that they have civilians inside of that school. This is what turned the public opinion against the action of Israel. Of course, Israel has the right to defend itself against terrorist attacks, but when every time that they kill one Hamas leader or one Hamas militant, with him they are killing at least 10 civilians. So the public opinion is asking, what is the end game here? And after killing 2,000 civilians, or 2,000 people, is Israel really more secure and safe?
Let's try to avoid the inflammatory comments about each other and the ad hominem attacks, because what we're trying to get at is whether or not the U.S. impression, the general opinion in the U.S. has been fair towards Israel. And Ben, I hear what you're saying. You think that it has not been, particularly when celebrities like Javier Bardem and his wife Penelope Cruz issue open letters condemning Israel and saying that they have engaged in genocide, but they don't mention Hamas. I think you're wrong about the media. I believe certainly that CNN has shown both sides, but there is an impression, Ben, and I understand why you feel this way, that certainly when it comes to celebrities, that they're giving Hamas a pass.
Well, and this, I think, is sort of the point with regard to showing both sides. When you're showing two sides is equivalent, and your idea of balance is to show Israel's side and then Hamas's side and then claim that that balance has been achieved, well, that's the sort of media coverage that would have led to the West losing World War II. So I'm not a big fan of that sort of balance.
But you're the one who's actually equating Hamas and Palestinian civilians. Those are not equal.
The hell I am.
Why would you do that? Hamas is a terror. Because you're saying that when the media shows civilians being killed, they're somehow propping up Hamas. That's not true.
That is not what I said.
You're saying...
I did not say that at all. I said you feel free to show civilians being killed. What I suggested is that you should provide all the context for those civilians being killed. And as far as the other woman who's on with me, I'm not familiar with her name. You know, as far as her personal insults, I mean, I'm not going to get into the quality of the movies that are made based on her books. I think that we can all stay away from that.
Rula.
Well, let's talk about reality and realpolitik and stay away from really ideology and hate, I would say. Look, Israel negotiated with Hamas more than once. The last time, and the most striking one, was in 2011 when they released 1,000 Hamas prisoners for one Israeli soldier. Let the public opinion, especially the Palestinian public opinion, believe if you use violence, we negotiate with you. While the PA, the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, recognized Israel, renounced violence, and got nothing in exchange. And today the world is asking, what can we do about this issue and move it in a context where we talk about occupation and blockade as solutions?
But to your point, Rula, I mean, wouldn't it just help if Hamas decided to stop trying to wipe Israel off the face of the earth? I mean, that's the non-starter. Isn't that, it's impossible to negotiate with them, given that?
Look, Israel negotiated with Hamas, but let's look at history. Americans and the British negotiated with IRA when they were considered an extremist terrorist group that would blow up schools, if we remember, and actually they signed a peace deal with them, and they agreed on a peace deal, and they brought peace to Northern Ireland. So this is the way you negotiate with your enemies, not with your friends. And finally, you can put that in context. Why we have cyclical violence? It's because of the occupation and because of the blockade.
All right. Obviously, you both have very interesting and differing perspectives. Ben Shapiro, Rula Jabal, thank you for being here. We'll talk to you again.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.